Take two. This is the Gillmor Gang. I'm Steve Gillmor. We're joined by Doc Searls in Santa Barbara. Welcome, Doc.
Good to see you. Good to be here.
Keith Teare in Palo Alto.
Correct.
Welcome.
Be here as well.
And unmuted, Kevin Marks in some other place.
I'm in San Francisco at Indie Webcamp.
Okay.
But I suspect I'm on the wrong side of the hill, so you may get a bit of breakup from me.
All right, so we've got an interesting slow week. What's going on? Since Scoble is in South by Southwest, he's usually the guy that I go to for trying to avoid certain topics by having him bring them up. So, Doc Searls, what's your take on what's going on?
I was just thinking that I'm really enjoying not being at South by Southwest this year.
Yes.
You know, it's the Yogi Berra thing. Nobody goes there. It's too crowded. So I'd actually forgotten that was going on. So that's sort of interesting.
Yeah, I'm not clear as to whether the music part has ended and the tech part has begun, or what. I know that Robert's been there for both weeks, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess he'll tell us when he gets back.
The tech part started yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Eric Schmidt did a talk about the NSA and intrusive government.
That's the kind we love best, isn't it? Yeah. So, yeah, our frogs are slowly boiling with the intrusive stuff going on, I suppose. Privacy, or as they say, as Keith might say, privacy. And maybe Kevin too, though they may have been acclimated to the U.S. at this point, is a huge thing, and it's been pretty interesting to follow that. I think we're going to see a lot of other shoes fall on that. I think that Europe is much more conscious about it than we are here. They're pushing through laws and other things like that. It's been an interesting thing to watch, and there's some new tech developments coming along, one of which I can't talk about, but it's all interesting stuff. I think that's going to be. I sense a tidal shift in the direction of, as I always do for the last 8 years, 20 years, to greater personal control of everything. And sooner, maybe now, this privacy thing will make it happen.
What is the privacy thing again?
Well, the ability to control who can see your stuff. You know, it would be nice if people could exchange their emails and their other messages and have fully private communications without fear of exposure, be able to surf the web without fear of surveillance and the rest of it. So I think it's going to be an interesting few months in seeing how that all shakes out.
But
it'll never finish shaking out, of course, but I'm optimistic about things going in a direction I would like.
So, in other words, if you just decide not to be afraid of it, then it'll go away?
No, it's not a matter of deciding not to be afraid of it. It's having the ability to have a fully encrypted private communication, be it with another person or with a banker or with somebody else you want to have a fully private communication with. Right now, it's not really quite possible. But optimistic
there was one company this week, and I can't remember the name of the company, but they came up with a way where the public key, private key stuff that we've known about for years, RSA, they implemented a version of that changes the key every n seconds, that makes it pretty much impossible to crack unless you'd have many more resources than even the NSA has got to be able to crack it. And that was through email.
Yeah. I think that there's I'm trying to find one right now. I added several more to the Project VRM list, but there's one in particular. It's a GitHub project that's has no publicity. It's a bunch of hackers working together on it, but it's yet another way to have a fully encrypted, tunneled communications, point to point, fully distributed, no centralization anywhere between anybody. There are a lot of geeks working on that right now. So I'm confident that good things will happen there. And by the way, the UK, as always, is probably the biggest hotbed of this kind of stuff right now.
So there's a Ukrainian company called Uprotel, UPROTEL, that has provided these services to the US military on occasion, If you go to their website, they got white papers about what they do. They're now developing a client for iPhone called Runny, RUNI. And that client gives you different levels of encryption on voice or text calls. So you can say you want just 256 encryption, but now you can layer multiple 256 encryptions on top of each other.
Wow.
So and it doesn't break the 256, rule about that's the maximum you're allowed under the rules of the US government, because it is just 256. They just use multiple of them simultaneously. And they've just, by the way, that's another thing to talk about, Ukraine. They've just left Ukraine to set up office somewhere else because they're fearful of what's going on in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Kevin?
Especially depending on where they are in the Ukraine, I suppose. If they're in Crimea, that's bad.
Yeah. They're in Kiev. I don't think they're in Crimea.
Yeah, Kiev is a pretty good distance away from Crimea, actually.
Yeah. But, that whole thing's interesting. I don't know if we want to get into politics this week, but the most stunning thing to me this week is listening, and I say this as a US citizen who is really in my brain not a US citizen. So I look at it dispassionately.
Or in your voice.
But, it's amazing to listen to the US government, and especially Kerry and Obama, talking about what Russia is doing as if there's never been a history of the US intervening in, Grenada or Central America or more recently Iraq. And, the language we all use to describe George Bush's BS, they are now using on Putin. And, if ever there was a sphere that Russia should care about, it is Crimea. Whatever you think about Russia and Putin, it's not unreasonable to say Russia has a direct strategic interest in that part of the world that's right next door to it. So it's almost like the least offensive thing Putin could do is doing. And the reaction from the US is dramatic. And it's interesting that the Europeans are not keen to impose sanctions or to overreact, given that. Putin's calling what happened in Ukraine a coup d'etat. It's interesting, is it a coup d'etat? It could be, you could say that. Or is it a revolution? And, is it legitimate from the eyes of Russia? No, that makes sense. But is it legitimate in the eyes of the world? Yes. So there's a lot of interesting issues it throws up, not least of which is the US's ability to be anti-imperialist when it's the other guy doing it, even though the US is probably the greatest villain in that.
Well, that'll be a good speech for, when you take your citizenship pledge. You can.
No, I've done it. I'm too late.
Oh, so you've grandfathered in.
Grandfathered in, yeah. Somebody could come and knock on my door and take me away. That could happen.
Well, this isn't Russia.
Exactly. Or is it?
Kevin, Marks, let me hear you talk so I can hear that you can be heard.
Okay. I'm going to have to mute myself because it's shutting you out again like it was before. So it isn't Russia. One of the most interesting things I read this week was Quinn Norton's essay on Medium about going to visit the National Intelligence Office and talking to all the people there and the different ideas that they have about what the net is and what organization is from what she brings to them from how things work here. That was fascinating, both because it was, as someone who's been targeted by the FBI, she's a great person to go and talk to them, but also in trying to explain the difference between hierarchical organization and web organization, and them still not understanding what's going on at all. That was a fascinating essay.
Did you understand that at all, Doc?
Did I take myself on mute? No, not entirely. But I was so busy suppressing coughs that's not really fair. So I have a cold.
Cough
so
suppression is we're complaining about Russian cough suppression now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing, talking about security, is Google Ventures and Kleiner Perkins put $10 million into Secret yesterday. Secret's that app that Scoble's been talking about, where people cloak their identity, but disclose secrets about where they work and stuff like that. It's interesting to me that anyone would think that's worth $40 million.
Well, I think they're thinking they're going to back into a Snapchat type of offering, right?
Yeah, but what does that really mean? Is that looking at my interpretation of that is yes, that is exactly what it is, except it's smaller and probably will always be smaller. And even if it got big, it's hard to understand how it could turn into a real business. It's a puzzler to me. I don't know if Kevin has a take on it, but or Doc, but I don't get why you would put 10 million. But I definitely wouldn't do that if I had the means to even ask myself if I wanted to.
I guess not.
And what's the exit? I mean, even Snapchat, is starting to look stupid for turning down the acquisition offer. I don't know what the exit is. It's all well and good to put money into something and pump up its value, but there has to be some way of getting it out the other side.
Doc, any thoughts on Snapchat?
No, but Keith, were you talking about another company that
Yeah.
is
It's called Secret.
secret?
Yeah,
I don't know them. So
actually
what do they do?
There's Whisper, which Sequoia invested in about 3 months ago, 10 million, I think. And now Secret. Whisper is, hey, guess what I just did? And Secret is more or less, hey, guess what my company just did? I think it's a lot more than that, but that's a big part of why it's getting to be popular. So they're these kind of anonymous. There's been a discussion here, by the way, about an anonymity versus named publishing and whether publishing is public or private. Secret is anonymous posts to your friends. Your friends meaning the people you know on Facebook, but you are anonymous. You don't know it's you. And Whisper is anonymous posts in public to your friends. So there's a lot of apps that are playing around with different parts of the human persona. Like in a way, Instagram started as anonymous and public. Twitter did too, because the profiles were all made up. You didn't have to be a real person, and it was all in public. Well, Whisper's like that. Secret is much more only to your friends, but they don't know who you are. So if we were all on it, I could say, it's Steve's birthday next week. He wouldn't know it was me saying it. But only we would see it because you're my friends.
Well, what this strikes me as, I mean, regardless of what the investment implications of it are, there's such a strong sense that everything right now, and actually everything all along, has been provisional. It's all scaffolding. There is no final state of anything. These are experiments, and for that matter, so is Facebook, and maybe even in a large sense, so is Google. Though I think Google is here for the duration.
You think that they're here for the duration more than Facebook?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Why
Well, they have a much more diverse business model. They're much less exposed. They cover much more ground. So just that alone.
How many users does Google have?
Well, I think everybody. So that or close enough.
They have 1 billion?
Oh, I mean, in terms of people searching, that's a user. Far more than that. But I mean,
I don't know the answer.
It's every Android phone, for example.
Kevin, do you know? You have to. I'm sorry, I muted you.
More like
Go
2
ahead.
billion, I think.
Say again.
It's more like 2 billion, I think. The Google usage is really, really high.
Okay, sorry, Doc. Go ahead.
Yeah, but my point isn't really about who survives. It's just the provisionality of everything. I mean, I think all these things are wonderful experiments, and some will succeed and some won't. But I think we're really finding out how early it is over time. It's becoming clearer and clearer that it's really early. It's not. These are not late times. These are still early times.
So,
of course, I say this over again, but
so put your guessing hat on, and let's fast forward. Not a long time, like say 6 months. What do you see as we're going to be thinking 6 months from now about what's really going on?
Well, here's a big one. I think we're going to start caring about cars. I think that they're all of the big guys, Apple and Google for that matter, and others are doing their deals with the car makers to get more and more of a share of the dashboard. And at the same time, there's efforts going on like Phil Windley's Fuse project, but he's not alone there, that are going to give you more personal control over your car. So your driving experience is really yours and not one that's delivered to you by a company trying to guess at what you want. But Apple just announced something that I forget what it was, AirPlay or something like that.
CarPlay.
CarPlay. That's a serious thing. A bunch of companies are signed on to that. Ford just dropped Microsoft's Fuse, which interestingly Phil Windley liked. But I don't think any of us want to be in our car in Microsoftville or Appleville or some other siloville, but rather we'd like the driving experience to be in ours with help from these other guys, but not where we're locked in. And so there's this interesting thing right now where there's the frost is off the pumpkin on surveillance in general. I mean, thanks to Snowden and a lot of other developments that have gone on in the last year, people are much more creeped out about being followed around, and you're getting much less investment and much less interest in Silicon Valley in surveillance. And yet at the same time, the car companies are a little bit behind the curve on that, and they're salivating over the possibility of monetizing that dashboard in new ways. So I think we're going to start seeing some things play out there. I think we'll see a similar thing with wallets, by the way. We need wallets that are really ours. Your wallet should be your wallet. I mean, I was going to have my wallet in my pocket. Let's say it's my wallet. It should be my wallet and not a Google wallet or an Apple wallet or a Microsoft wallet or somebody else's wallet. It should be my wallet. And I think there are things like the wallet, the bicycle, the car, the things that are very personal. Is going to turn into a kind of a battleground between the forces of personal sovereignty on the one hand and sort of the libertarian forces. That I don't mean that politically. I mean it in more of a emotional way, and those that want to centralize and control everything. And I think we're going to start seeing something play out there. And the privacy thing has a lot to do with it as well.
But do you think it's going to be a battle between those that are concerned about privacy, or is it going to be a battle for what kind of services are delivered in return for corporate understanding of what your interests are?
I think it's going to be a lot of things. I think it's going to be both of. It's like there's going to be a lot of and logic involved. On the one hand, like the music industry wants part of this. They very much want. They still see every time you listen to a piece of music as a performance, and they want to be paid for you to hear that performance. And that battle's been going on for many years,
but they've almost destroyed the music business by
they have, but it's not destroyed at all. It's still there. It's still
Spotify.
I was actually in Hollywood yesterday, or indirectly at UCLA. We were there touring colleges with our son, and there was a big meeting of Hollywood types and lawyers, and it was so clear from the agenda. I didn't go into it, that it's new ways of monetizing music in cars, in other places. It's not like this is off the table at all. They're making some money on it. They're not making as much as they used to. But I think the notion that the music industry got blown up and is dead, I think, is wrong. I think it has adapted. It has changed. We may not like it. It may not be in a form that we would prefer as listeners, as people who love music. But that doesn't mean that the industry has gone away by any means. They certainly control the lawyers. They control Congress. They control a lot. And that's going to be but that's one thing. Another thing is just that there are going to be more inventions like Fuse, which your car has a backplane. It's this port called the ODB2 port. You could plug anything you want into that. It was created for dealers and garages to do diagnostics on your car, but in fact it's a thing that coughs out data all the time. That should be your data. What can you do with that? Once really interesting things come out of that, we'll see all kinds of things happening. The insurance companies care about it a great deal. They want to give you, if you say, I'm going to be a law-abiding citizen, and I'm glad to share my driving information. There you go. What is that one, Keith?
This is automatic. I've got one plugged into my car, and It scores my driving. I'm a
There you
57.
go.
I'm out of 100 because I put my foot on the brake too much and I accelerate too fast. And if something goes wrong with the car, it tells me what it is that's wrong.
Does it tell you you drive on the left by mistake ever?
No.
Yeah, about a nanosecond before you hit a truck.
Yeah.
I programmed it to be English.
Yeah. So I think it's just, the car is one of those areas where there are going to be many different forces that are going to be coming into play, and a lot of new innovation that's not going to be Apple's or Google's or some other big company. It's going to be in the green field that's under your dashboard and nobody's paid much attention to. But the car maker is going to want to take different positions on that too. Some are going to say we want to close that off. Some are going to say we want to, augment it in some way. By the way, Steve? I'm curious to know. You probably discussed this already. How did you like the Bob Dylan Chrysler pitch on the Super Bowl?
Oh, I thought it was fantastic.
It's pretty amazing. I thought.
I wasn't sure that he was actually in the commercial. I think they had a Madame Tussauds version of him that they were carrying around on a dolly, but he looked like this.
I know. Yeah. Did you notice he actually didn't play pool very well? It's like
Well, that was the part that I thought was realistic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but
the rest of it, where he's got the guitar and walking around.
Just this kind of you can't tell whether he wrote it or not, but the fact that you can't tell
It
is
says
interesting.
it was well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought it was wonderful.
So just to go back to something you said earlier, Doc, a couple of things kind of piqued my attention. The first is, the relationship between you and a thing like your car, getting locked into a single vendor. And then secondly, being locked in at the platform level. I think of it in two different ways. I almost don't mind being locked into a single vendor when it's me and a thing. Like if it's me and my TV, I don't mind it being Apple TV that I use. Or me and my car, I probably don't mind it being CarPlay. As long as it's good, as long as I like it, and I chose a car because it does it. But when it's me and other people, it feels to me as if the attempt to lock people in is failing. And the WhatsApp acquisition is kind of interesting in this regard. So if you think about the messaging ecosystem on mobile, WeChat is about as big as WhatsApp. Line and KakaoTalk are getting up there. Kik is huge. You've basically, what's happened at the human level is if I now want to chat with you, Doc, I have no idea which app you're using. There's no kind of universal mechanism that's separate from a vendor for me to chat with you. If I could use your phone number and just chat with you, or your email address if I know that, or even your Twitter handle, and you could kind of control whether to ignore me, answer me, or block me, that seems to me where mobile's going to end up. And Google and Apple represent a problem there because they both own their fiefdoms. Neither one of them is going to provide that solution. So it's up to people like us to try to, I call it infrastructure as a service for wireless. It's like somebody has to use the cloud and deliver something. I think of Game Center. Game Center is on iOS and every app can benefit from it if it wants to, but Game Center itself doesn't run games. But all the games can benefit from it. It feels to me as if human infrastructure is where we need to escape from vendor lock-in. Between a human and an object, I'm less concerned.
Well, is it?
So that's
not sure.
that's exactly one of the things we're working on here at Indie Webcam. It's fascinating you were saying that. So part of it is bridging into the different silos and making sure that stuff works. So we've got your brother here, Steve. Dan's here, and he's managed to get his website hooked up so that the comments people make on Facebook and Twitter flow back to his site. That was this morning's work. But another thing we look at is exactly the problem Keith was talking about, which is how do you decide which method to contact people? Yeah. And the thing that we're working from the URL, so we're saying, okay, on my website, I can list the different ways you can contact people. Can we present that in a way that makes sense to people as a group of app icons to click on? And they can click on the one that makes sense to talk to me at this particular time. So you can switch between Skype and iChat and iMessage and SMS, depending on which ones make sense for both of us.
So what, a kind of hub or router that manages between these multiple models?
Well, we've got
it's more like letting the people do it. So it's showing that I'm available on these things, and you click on the icon of the one that you want to use.
Sorry, we're having a confusion. By the way, anybody who's trying to steal my password off of the show, I change it every day. So or I don't. Don't bother. I never leave my iPad anywhere, so nobody's getting into it. Can we continue? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Kevin, did you make your point? Because I missed it.
So the idea is to show you, if you go to my site, you see the set of icons that represent different ways you can contact me, and they look like the app icon that you would use, and you click on the one that makes sense to you, and then that launches the one that works. So if you want to decide between Skype and iMessage and Hangouts and whatever else we've got, Facebook Messenger, you can pick the one that you're comfortable in that's on the list of ones that I'm listening to.
So if I understand it right, you're saying that these things are, even if these things are siloed, they're kind of like tunnels. You can choose, okay, here's the WeChat one, here's Twitter, here's this one, here's that one. I can pick which one I want, and there are tools for integrating these, like Adium does for chat, I suppose.
No, you can't, Doc, because they don't. The mobile ones don't have any kind of APIs. Some of them use XMPP, but very few of them, and then you can address somebody via a handle that works across multiple clients.
But we're right back in the same, our discussion, our argument about whether or not this has to be multiplexed by a single application, and I just think that's ridiculous. There's no reason why people can't use multiple channels through their devices, whichever ones are mitigated. I mean, what's wrong with a registry that you enter into that gives you the people that you're trying to communicate with an understanding of which are the overlapping complementary channels that they can reach you on. I mean, I don't care whether I use text or Valium or whatever the name of that app is.
Adium. But but the problem is you don't know. For the most part, the sender, the initiator, has no idea how to get through to the receiver, unless it's someone very close to you where you've registered some knowledge somewhere about them. But just in the app, unlike say an email address, an email address and a phone number is universal. Every app that can make a phone call can call a phone number. Every app that can send an email can call an email address, but not every chat app can initiate a chat with a third party.
Right, which I think is a limitation of chat apps, not a limitation of our devices or of the real-time internet.
It's fixable. You could make it so that...
It's not fixable. It's like saying that, that once we all get along, that Rodney King will be president. I mean, what is the... There is no way that any company is going to be able to... multiplex multiple channels. I mean, that's why IM sucks. Is you can't do it.
If I say any more, someone will shoot me. But 8 weeks from now, we'll talk about this again, and then we'll see.
Okay, well, 10 weeks from now, we'll talk about it again. It'll be what it is right now.
Well, hopefully by the end of this afternoon, we'll have a demo of the stuff we're talking about here, which is presenting a way for you to show all the options that are available to you. The problem at the moment is I have a list of ways to contact you in my address book, but I have no idea which ones you actually want to listen to. So I've got a phone number and an email address and an iMessage thing and a blah, 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 blah. Whereas actually you would much rather be reached through a Twitter direct message or something. And you need to be a way to express that fact to the people who want to call you and show them the ones that you'll accept messages from and potentially selectively do it. You want to say, I'll accept SMSs from some people, not from others, and I don't want to broadcast this to everyone. So it's an understanding of how to construct that.
Right, so it's a registry.
Useful.
It's kind of a registry that you're talking about.
It is a registry, but it's not just a registry because you also need routing.
Well, but I mean, Doc, isn't this
But the routing exists. The routing is
VRM, not the other way around?
If you can, I can put a hot link from a URL to the client to launch any of these clients on your iPhone or on your web browser, and we can detect which one you're looking from. So we can say, okay, you're on the Mac, therefore these 4 links will work. Oh, you're on the iOS. These 4 links will work, and you click on the one you're comfortable with, and you can bridge it that way.
But Kevin, you can do that, but you can't get a message through. There's no APIs that let you. You could launch an app, but there's no way to get a message that you just sent into the app. You have to yourself then load the app, and there's about 5 too many steps that are totally unnecessary. But I'm on the same page as you. I think there's a fix. I think we might see a different way to fix it. My way is all to do with the human being the central point for inbound, and your way is to orchestrate, if you like, multiple endpoints on behalf of a person, and then make them all available depending on choice. I prefer the first to the second, but they're both addressing the same problem.
Well, it's a question of what you consider the representation of the human being. So where we start from with the indie web stuff is to say your representation is your own page, your own web page, and therefore if you embed a bunch of links on that can be the place that routes you out to the other things. So we're working from that premise to design this. That's the thinking here.
And I'm doing some stuff with Just.me that isn't a contribution to this discussion. I don't know if it will be consistent. I think it's going to be totally consistent with the concept of the human being in control, openness, but better still, discoverability and certainty in communications.
Doc, is this VRM?
Not really. Not exactly anyway. I mean, to the degree that which they work from the individual toward the institutions, it is. And that's sort of in a way what Kevin's talking about, I think, that there are many ways to integrate these things. But I think Keith's point about the non-compatibility of these different chat systems, for example, especially the incomplete and sort of tragic non-adoption of XMPP is, it's just endemic. We've always had this. I mean, XMPP was invented by Jeremy Miller to as a standard protocol for chat, basically, and it's used by WhatsApp, but it's their particular version of it, which makes it non-compatible with all the rest of them. I don't think it's just a matter of APIs. I think it's a matter of just siloization. That's what they try to do, but I do think it's fixable, and I do think we will work it out over time. I think that it's
well. There's two things there. I mean, one is a lot of people are using XMPP as their protocol. Google is, Facebook is, but they're using addressing spaces that aren't necessarily compatible, and it's much harder to bridge between them. But the other thing is we're also building a parallel set of stuff for this with WebRTC, and that's now advanced to the point where you can embed a WebRTC thing and have that work on make Chrome and Firefox on the desktop, Chrome on Android, and we have to build clients for iOS because Apple are lagging, but there will be a way to bridge those back and forth. And what that means is you can have a video chat through somebody's server. It has to go through a server to tell you who you're talking to. It doesn't send the data through a server, which should be good. It sends that point to point, which should be good for interception reasons as well. So that's something that's been moving. I've been talking about this for about a year. It's been moving through the web standard stack and has started to appear in actual shipping browsers on lots of platforms now. So that's something that's maybe a way to unify this over the next couple of years.
But that's not a mobile solution at all.
No, there's a way. The key is HTTP.
Yes, it is. It was I was using it today on Android.
Hang on, one at a time, please. Go ahead.
HTTP as a transport is ubiquitous, more so than XMPP. And with things like WebRTC, but not only WebRTC, you now have the possibility of delivering cloud services to mobile clients that can 100% be guaranteed to be available, not just on the client, but probably on every app within the client as well. And that is an insight that leads you to think about a path to universalism on mobile that the point where all human beings could theoretically be glued together with a single click, and then choose whether to take the inbound request for a chat or not. And if I say any more, I'm going further than I want to. But there are universals even on mobile. Apple's very open with HTTP, so is Google, so is Microsoft with Windows Phone, so is even BlackBerry. There's things you can do that don't require XMPP anymore because we can now scale the cloud really, really well. When XMPP was invented, we couldn't, and so we needed a special protocol for chat. That's less needed now, and that's a good thing because HTTP is everywhere.
Kevin?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, you can do text chat over HTTP fairly easily. But the point about WebRTC is that you can also do audio-video chat, the kind of thing we're doing now, and that's evolving to the point where, at the moment, if you're using an audio-video chat thing in the browser, you're using a plugin. It's evolving to the point where it's built into the browsers, and it's already shipped in Chrome and Firefox mainstream, and it's in Chrome on Android as well. So that's the two dominant browsers have this. The others are catching up, and there are ways to do it with plugins to bridge it. And you can build an app to do it because it's a protocol. So the mobile answer at the moment is it works in mobile Chrome. The mobile answer in the future will be you can build apps to do it as well.
Wait, why is Safari behind on that one, Kevin?
Because Apple doesn't care about it, because they want you to use their stuff. Their answer is we've got a thing built into the OS for this. Why do you want to do it in the browser? So that they say you should be using FaceTime and iMessage and whatever stuff. Historically, Apple's been very weird about this. They've been back and forth 4 or 5 times. So there was an initial audio-video chat thing that was built back in the 90s. Then there was the quick-time broadcast stuff that I worked on that was based on a set of open web standards. Then there was iChat, which did this. But when they launched iPhone, they didn't port iChat at all. They just went with SMS. And then they switched to using FaceTime for the video, and then they built iMessage. So they've each time they've gone through I think it's some kind of internal strategy tact about what's allowed to be a system service and what's allowed to be
Okay, well, the
and
last
it
part
ends up being turf wars between Google and Apple.
Sounded good
Whereas
as far
on the Google Firefox side, they're doing it web first.
Okay, we missed some key ingredients in that last sentence.
I liked how Kevin turned into a vampire when he froze there for a second. It was kind of cool.
I'll just try that again. I think the issue inside Apple is its organizational strategy tactics between what counts as a system service, what counts as an app, and what counts as an API for other people. And they bounce stuff back and forth between groups to make that work. And they've shipped things at different points in this stack over time. And at the moment, they're focusing on building apps and having a very smooth user experience for this stuff. But they've dropped the ball on interop. There's lots of broken things about iMessage. There was a promise from Steve Jobs that FaceTime will be an open standard, and then nothing happened. Nothing has happened about that. And the open standard that actually exists is WebRTC, and that's being pushed forward by Google and Firefox, and Microsoft is looking at that one, where they've got Skype and they have their own agenda, but at least they've contributed some codecs to it. But Apple is sort of sitting on the sidelines of this one at the moment.
So for me, WebRTC is awesome, but it's kind of, I think there's a prior thing that has to be solved first, and that is how do you address a person with the knowledge that they will get the resulting query from you. And I think the key to that is in building an overlay network, overlaying all of the existing identifier systems, whether it be phone numbers, email addresses, Twitter handles, Google plus, plus Keith Teare type of stuff. It really doesn't matter, that you can build an overlay network taking all of those identifiers, give them to the user to control, and then give the user the ability to receive requests for chat or in the future voice or video, using any one of those identifiers that are likely to be in someone else's address book as a means of getting to you. I think that's the key. So it's the overlay network, but you also need a way to deliver the alert or the notification with certainty. And those handles give you that. You can deliver a DM or an email or an SMS as an initial step if you need to. If somebody's fully provisioned themselves, you wouldn't even need that. So to me, it's really all about getting above the vendors to an overlay layer that can incorporate almost any identifier and harmonize them or normalize them to a single individual.
What is the incentive for the user to get involved in some management layer?
Taking back control of all communications with themselves so that they know the channels and they can have expected outcomes. And secondly, so they can, with a single action, initiate a conversation with somebody else, no matter what app or device that other person is on. It's just productivity, and when you add certainty to productivity, it can't be bad.
No, in theory, it sounds ideal, but in practice, there has to be some sort of incentive and motivation on the part of the user. And these abstract, I mean, I think most users have no idea what you're talking about or care.
Oh, they won't have to. This will all be transparent to them.
No, that's the point. The thing is, it's an overlay on the existing stuff. So you can
either you're locked up or you're thinking.
They can keep using the apps they're using, and you can have a communications overlay on that just makes your life easier, and that will work. And if they only ever use one app, you'll know that, and you'll talk to them in that mode, and they'll talk to you in that mode, and it'll work.
Right. So I'm sorry, but you're intermittent here, so I'm going to just interpret. So maybe what you're suggesting is there's some sort of, maybe what both of you are suggesting is that there's some sort of recorder that analyzes a successful connection between two people and then forwards that to the registry so that the next time that you want to talk to that person, it does that as a first best guess of what the connection is. Would that be right, Kevin? I mean, Keith?
Kevin and I might not be on the same page when you get to that level of detail. In my case, you don't need to do that because all channels that you have provisioned are available always. And you just answer on any one of them that you happen to be on. The others will be notified, but as soon as you answer on one, it will ignore all the others. So there's no need to update a registry. The registry actually is a list of all channels that you can be connected with on, and it's clever enough to drop the call when you answer it on one of them.
Yeah, no, that's part of it, but it's also they may make different sense at different times. So you don't want to press a button and have 6 of the messages come through at once. What you want to do is display which ones will have a chance of reaching you, and let the other person click on the one that they want to use.
Yeah, Doc, does this remind you of the beginnings of the identity movement, or is this just beyond? I mean, I know that you have you're optimistic, inevitably, but does this remind you at all of the struggles for coming up with some sort of interoperability layer that actually never happens?
I think it's all part of the same drama. There's always this conflict between the need for standardization and compatibility and interop on the one hand, and for companies to have exclusive advantages on the other. And the latter is going to be implemented in technology that gives everybody else fits in the meantime. I think what Kevin and Keith are both saying is really interesting and good stuff, though. What Keith said about the evolution of chat and the limitations of XMPP and how HTTP being more prevalent may be covering that well enough is interesting stuff. As for identity, I think identity may still be worked out at some point, but to me, it's still the early days of that. It's still, I'm sort of amazed that we still haven't worked that one out, and we may never. I don't know. I think that I still think that when we do work it out, it's going to be something that's based on what individuals define. But I think identity is an easier one to solve than this particular thing. This is a different one.
Really? You think it's easy? Wow.
Yeah, I think it's easier because with all the different kinds of chat and messaging we're talking about, they do require centralization of various kinds. They do require somebody else's cloud and not your own. And you're going to have lots of different clouds. You're going to have lots of different companies that all have their own problems to work out. Like Kevin did a really good job, I think, of describing the kind of gyrations Apple's going through inside itself, trying to make some kind of sense out of what they've wanted to do for a long time, and the 15-point moving average that started with Steve and continues with Tim, and where they're trying to make it work with television and God knows how many other things that they're rolling out over a number of years. Not easy, and and trying to makes. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes trying to make sense of that, and certainly there's some paranoia involved. To me, the most interesting thing about the WhatsApp purchase was not WhatsApp, but the fact that they had a business model that wasn't advertising, and that advertising turned out to have, in that case, negative market value, and the absence of it had a positive market value to the tune of $19 billion, that was interesting to me.
Yeah, more than interesting. This is, by definition, the next layer of monetization of direct communications.
Yeah, I mean, so everybody wants to be a telco. That's their. Even the telcos want to be telcos, and they want the internet to be a telco system. That's one of the oldest struggles that we've had, and they all still want to be Ma Bell. They're all descended from Ma Bell one way or the other, or in Europe the PTTs, and they're billing companies traveling as communications companies, and they want to find ways to bill for things. And advertising turned out to be some kind of weird gravy that has a very low degree of leverage, and a whole lot of other baggage that we're discovering now that around surveillance and privacy and the rest of it. So, but I think everybody does want to be a telco, and that's a tough one because I don't think the customers want everybody to be a telco.
Doc,
it's not much fun.
Have you followed what's going on with iBeacons? These things?
No, I haven't. I know of them, but I haven't followed them.
So
I know. Yeah, John, has John been on here shoving those things at us? I first learned about them from John Borthwick. They're interesting.
So, well, what's interesting, even more interesting, these beacons are passive beacons in that these you put on a wall somewhere or under a desk, and they transmit 3 numbers into the air. And for that to be useful, you need a smartphone that can talk to the cloud and ask what those 3 numbers mean and get a meaningful result back. Mm-hmm. So they're really fixed points in place and time. But what's really interesting is the phones now have the ability to become beacons. So theoretically, you personally can become 3 numbers. And if you provision that in some kind of cloud registry, when you walk into a room, if you choose to be visible, the room can know you're there. And taking retail out of this, there's obviously lots of retail reasons why both the buyer and the seller might like that, but there's tons of real world reasons. Imagine if you're in a bar and you know who's in the bar, and you can go to the cloud and say who's single, and the people who are single who've chosen to admit that, you get their photos back. Things like that.
They take their wedding ring off and they think they're single.
That's the anonymous.
Then we get into this other kind of problem that Sarah Slocum got into.
True, but all I'm saying is beacons and identity is becoming decentralized and physical. It's going to be on the phone, and the phone and you will be kind of inseparable. Of course, you'll have all the control you normally have to mask your identity or to pretend you're someone you're not. That's the same in real life. None of that goes away, but identity becomes something you carry around with you, not something that's in your Facebook profile or your LinkedIn profile. It's decentralized, under your control, and it exists in time and space, which gives rise to a whole bunch of, payments, dating, making doors open, turning your car engine on. I mean, all kinds of things become doable that would be hard to do without this.
That's a really good point. I think that having your own beacon that is your identity, or at least a proxy for your identity, that where you can share selectively with privileged others, I think is a really interesting thing. I think it's more interesting in terms of what one can do with the consent of one's social network, that where you know what the social network is. I was thinking actually right now at South by Southwest, one of the interesting problems there's always had there is how you coordinate where everybody is, and how do you know that your cohort might be nearby. And there must be probably somebody is there right now showing off something that does something like that. But I think, and I'm interested in knowing what the fully distributed aspect of that is, Keith. If you're, your example with the little gizmo is that it's got its 3 numbers that it generates, and then you have to go to a cloud to find out what they are. But do you have to go to a cloud to find out who you are?
Yes.
Or for somebody else to find? Do you really? I mean, but could you not do this in a point-to-point way? If you and I both know who each other are.
The gadgets can broadcast a URL, and you go to a URL, so you don't have to go to the cloud to resolve them. You can go to a URL that's owned by, that's not being resolved by anything except DNS.
Yeah, I mean, when I say the cloud, I'm not talking about a database necessarily. I'm just talking about the link between your phone and my phone is not an ad hoc network that we create using Zigbee or something. It is the cloud. It makes logical sense to use the network that's already there, not create a new one. But so now it could be that your phone gets the information from my phone, but it's going to do it by going up to the cloud and back down again. If that makes sense.
Well, it doesn't have to necessarily. I mean, it doesn't have to go to the cloud. What it can do is your phone can broadcast a URL that then resolves back to your phone and serves from that. That's possible.
It's possible, but I think it's a worse implementation. You don't really gain anything, and you lose a lot of productivity by doing it that way.
Answer?
Well, one example someone was talking about here was the Philips light bulbs and the controller that they have that you contact. What that has a cloud proxy, but all the proxy does is tell you what the public IP address of that is and the private IP address, which means that your phone can decide whether to contact it on the local network, because it's got the private address, the 10 dot whatever address, or if the phone and the light bulb base station have different IP addresses, then it will communicate with the public IP address. So it's a way of resolving that global local thing, but it means that you are doing one ping up to the cloud to decide whether you're global or local, and then you're going back to the local one to connect to it.
Okay. So I want to start wrapping this one up. I mean, there's been so much information here that I think that we're suffering from a certain overload problem. So I want to get Doc's take on a couple of things before we go. But is there anything else that you guys want to talk about before we go to the wrap-up? So
I would just say that what we're really talking about here is why history doesn't start with chat apps, and why Facebook's acquisition of WhatsApp in some ways represents the end of an era, not the beginning of one, because we're at the start of a period where smart people are thinking about human communication outside of the context of single apps.
Okay. Doc, you agree?
Yeah, sounds good.
You'll go with it, huh?
I'll go with that, yeah.
And the other thing is that there has been this sea change. People are thinking about anonymity, pseudonymity, and everything else, and that has been a huge rush of interest over the last 9 months or so since the Snowden revelation started. That has been a sea change, and there've been waves of it there already. But there is a big difference between, yes, we'll arbitrarily trust one company like Facebook to hold everything, to no, actually we want different ways of doing this. And if you want to know why Google's backing Secret, I think that's partly it. It's a hedge against ruling things through their services. I was saying in the chat, there's a distinction between, we talk about cloud now, and we mean servers belonging to one company. The original definition of the cloud was the web and the internet as a whole and routing across that. That was, the cloud diagram we draw was the TCP routing diagram. You say, I send a signal into the cloud, it comes out the other side. I don't care what's inside the cloud, just so long as we can communicate with each other. And I think that definition of the cloud may come back, as opposed to cloud meaning server owned by Google that we both connect to.
I also think the concept of, we've used the word registry a lot today. Registry goes together with resolution, meaning you take one thing and you can resolve it into another thing through a registry. And the DNS does that for domain names to IP numbers. That concept of a registry and a resolution can relate to lots of things. Back in the day, I did it with real names, where we resolved URLs from keywords in multiple languages. In some ways, we've been very unimaginative as technologists in thinking about the architecture of a decentralized world with lots of authority and power in the hands of the individual, managed through registration and resolution services.
Okay, so Doc, my question for you is, do you think are you surprised by the way that Microsoft seems to be completely hamstrung in terms of being able to enter into the heart of this discussion? This is the first time that Microsoft's been mentioned, other than a brief mention about them not being involved in the entire show. I mean, what does this say to you?
It's kind of sad. I mean, they're turning into Unisys. They're profoundly dull at this point in history. It's in fact, I was busy writing before we started here. I think Microsoft should embrace Linux. I think Microsoft should basically adopt Linux. Just take all its expertise in what it's already doing. Don't throw Windows away. Have that be their preferred OS for devices, but to embrace Linux at the server level and get back involved in all the businesses that are abandoning them right now, like banking. I mean, the fact that there's this crisis going on right now with ATMs, like 90% of all the ATMs are running Windows XP. Microsoft announces it's going to drop support for Windows XP, and the entire banking system, which banking business would gets its panties in a wad, which they should have seen coming years ago. Microsoft said it was coming. They didn't do much about it. But in the meantime, a lot of these companies are going over to Linux anyway for their ATMs. Why not embrace it? I mean, I think that there's still a position for Microsoft in the marketplace. But an interesting thing to me is they hired a new guy. There's a few profiles of him. I don't remember his name. I don't really care. I hope he's a good guy. I hope he does a good job. But it's dull. I mean, they're a dull company at this point. We don't expect anything interesting out of them. And that's just, it's kind of the way of nature. They've got plenty of income coming in from whatever they're doing for now, but they're not leading. And I suspect it's because, they're old and they're, who wants to work there now? I mean, really? I mean, do you want to work there or do you want to work somewhere else? It comes at a certain point, it comes down to talent. And it reminds me kind of when, if you were a COBOL programmer, you were guaranteed a lifetime of dull employment, and it's kind of the same way if you really know the depth of Windows, you're kind of guaranteed that as well, because there are going to be legacy companies holding on to that stuff. But at a certain point, they do turn into RIM. They do turn into BlackBerry, though they're more embedded than those guys.
Okay, so let me turn that around. Do you think that's going to happen to Google?
No.
Why not?
I think Google is much more plugged into the net, the whole internet ethos, and the way the internet operates, and the value system of. I think Google does embrace openness in a general way. I think there are many specific examples where they lock things down and they run into trouble, but on the whole, I think Google does want to be fully diversified. I think they've made so many smart moves. I think what they're doing right now with gigabit cities is brilliant. They're not doing it exactly the way I'd like them to do it. I'd like them to just deliver internet dial tone and not do cable TV, essentially, try to compete in the cable business. But they're what they're doing is creating in probably 40 cities in the next 3 or 4 years. The cities that have, gigabit connectivity going, especially to other cities that are also on the Google backbone. That and you add in the Chattanoogas of the world. That's the beachfront. That's the business beachfront of tomorrow, and it is going to be a huge monkey wrench into the middle of the cable business, because cable has gone out of its way to grow internet connectivity and speeds as slowly as possible. They're using data caps and other shit like that. It's Google's being very smart there, and they're supporting business. They're going to be, a very well-off utility right in the middle of everything, without biasing the throughput one bit. And I think that's really cool.
Doc, I mean,
Yeah.
you could argue the opposite, and I'll try.
Okay.
Microsoft has been really good that whilst they're becoming irrelevant, their revenues have stayed strong.
Hmm.
Google's core revenues, if Google was to become irrelevant, and by that I mean search advertising, because that's the core of their revenue. As we move to Android or iOS, for that matter, from the desktop, search revenues don't really travel very well to mobile.
Yeah.
And as that happens, it could be that Google remains relevant because of Android, whilst losing its revenue. And that would be catastrophic for them.
Yeah, I mean they're very exposed. Any company in the advertising business is very exposed. That they have the advantage with search advertising, that at least the results you're getting are relevant to what you just looked for at some level, even if you don't click on anything. You did search for something. There is some alignment with intent. You're not getting that, for example, with Facebook, where you just get ads for crazy shit, and because they happen to sell some at you. Yet, at some point, somebody is going to disrupt search as we know it today. It's inevitable, and I think Google probably knows that. I know from talking to people at Google, and I'm sure you have too, that they are very aware of how exposed they are on the advertising front, and they want to diversify, and they're looking for ways to do that. And I think that that's why
But that's why I asked the question in the first place. Microsoft's been very well aware of what it was going to happen to them, but they still couldn't stop it. So how is Google going to avoid what Keith's talking about?
I think that to me, so much comes down to, are you an exciting place to work, and are you going to be able to attract the best people? I'm really interested in Kevin's thoughts about that in respect to Apple. I wonder why people would want to work for Apple when they can't even blog about what they're doing. But I think Apple's still an exciting place, and they have a major position in the world, and it sounds like, you have an Apple business card that sounds kind of cool. I think Google's still similar that way. I think they're doing enough cool shit that they can attract a lot of the best talent. Microsoft, I don't think so. That's why I said they're turning into Unisys. They're turning into a dull company, and who wants to work for a dull company? I think the short answer is a lot of engineers that come over from Asia is what I've been told. You get your perfect SATs, and you go through the system in the U.S. You get to work for Microsoft. And I don't know what the whole story there is, but I think there's some subset of the engineering population that still thinks Microsoft's a cool place to work, and maybe it is at some levels. But if I were an engineer, I'm not sure. I think Microsoft would be pretty low on my list of places that I might want to work. I think tops of the list would be none of the above, and just for my own company. But I think for any big company to remain relevant, they have to be an attractive place to work. And I think right now Google's diverse enough so they can pull that off.
Kevin?
I mean, part of it is where you can have an impact, and that's the reason you work for Apple or Google is that you know that your stuff will go out to millions or billions of people in short order. So that's enormously attractive. Now, you're giving up some degree of control over your destiny for that. The value of doing a startup is that you have a bit more control, but the advantage of working with something like that is you get to, touch the lives of millions of people. So that's definitely the attraction for working for those companies. And that's part of the that's the sort of problem with Microsoft's downward spiral, is that used to be the reason to go to Microsoft, because you were on everyone's desktop, and that's not true anymore. They as they've become almost completely irrelevant to anyone working in tech, and less and less relevant to ordinary people over time too, then that attraction that was there, the idea of, I can ship this, it'll be in Windows, it'll be in Office, everyone in the world will be able to see it, goes down, and that's a deeper problem. As far as Google and search and advertising, well, the one thing that they've got on the mobile front that is the killer is the navigation and the maps, and the ability to, when you search for somewhere, to go there, to direct you somewhere that potentially has an advertising coupon or things like that. And that they're playing the longer game there with the same playbook of, there's a strong intent here, I want to find lunch in this bit of San Francisco, and then they'll say you should go to this place rather than this place, or here's some choices. Pick hit, and this is an advertising. There's an advertising model that makes perfect sense there.
All right, I think we've had a meeting of the mind. I don't know what the mind actually thinks, but I'm good with it, as Doc said.
You've had enough.
No, that's what you said. I haven't had enough. I just want to wrap it up because Kevin's going to lose his battery, and he's threatening to bring my brother on the show, so I have to avoid that problem. I love my brother. Okay, so I want to thank a number of people. First of all, I want to thank somebody who I've forgotten to thank for many weeks, which is the guy that's in the middle of the screen here, Keith Teare. I want to thank him for Archimedes Labs providing us with these two cameras that make this show go forward. It's become more and more clear to me that this kind of community is the value that we're presenting here, and I appreciate that. So I wanted to say that. I want to thank, in the same context, New Tech, without which the show would not be on video. And with their new system, there's just an incredible amount of, I wouldn't call it potential anymore. It's actually something that we're starting to explore, just in terms of ideas about how we can present things. The thought that we could bring a low-cost phone image, however distorted and intermittent, into the show on for an entire hour and 15 minutes, whatever this show is. We tried to do this 3 years ago. It didn't work. The last 4 or 5 shows, we've been doing it every time. It's just extraordinary how it's changed the complexion of this show in ways that we're experiencing here, and it we're getting very good. One of the things about the new TriCaster is that it's relatively simple to keep all of this information flexible enough that we can bounce away, bring somebody new in, accommodate somebody not being there, etc. There's something about the socialization of this environment that has changed fundamentally, and I'm very, very appreciative to it, to New Tech for providing this technology to us. In the same boat, I'm appreciative of Salesforce.com's support for the show. John Tashek hopefully will return next week. We've been doing some very interesting conversations with analysts and just out there I've been on planes more than I've been, in my house in the last few weeks, and that's going to continue for some time. But the benefits to that, in terms of what's going on with companies like Salesforce and also John Borthwick's company, BetaWorks. There's a terrific book that he distributed at an event a couple weeks ago that unfortunately is not available on PDF or whatever. They may release it at some point. If you ping BetaWorks and ask them for it, I've gotten through about 3 pages of it. It's an entire book, and it's really interesting about the kinds of ideas that it's setting off in our brains. It's kind of the feeling I get from Doc is that we're in a time where the usual conundrums are still there, but there's this spirit of I wouldn't call it excitement, but just sort of optimism that's growing again. And I find that I don't think we've even tapped into that feeling on this show, but that leaves a number of other shows to do that with. So I want to thank Doc Searls for bringing that vibe in today.
You're welcome.
I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. And I want to thank Kevin Marks for... What was that?
I like it.
Yeah, exactly. I want to thank Kevin Marks for thoroughly confusing me. And I guess that's about it. I want to thank the chat room. It's not really a room, is it? It's more like a bunch of diehards who continue to make this show go forward. All right, I've said enough.
It's like a hallway. It just kind of goes like this on down. People in a hallway.
Really, it's kind of like looking at, walking down the corridor at school.
Exactly. They all have their
and looking to
lockers
see if
and
your
they're all-
name's on a list and whether that's good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can't tell. Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.